I'm going to start this in a minute. I usually do not go live twice in one day, but this is so bad that I can't let this stay up for more than, I can't let his response exist for more than 10 hours. So just make sure the YouTube is loading, and then we'll get on with this, and it's going to be 15-20 minute refutation, and that's it. I don't have time for anything else, and it's kind of boring, to be honest with you. All right, so we're here. Everybody's here. Wait for some people to trickle in. So if you're watching this in retrospect, when I do live streams, I wait for people to trickle in. So you're going to have to wait a second. We're going to do a refutation of proving Islam, who does not understand the New Testament. One of the most unique, I'll give him credit, the most unique reading of the New Testament I've ever seen. So let me adjust my camera a little bit. Having a bit of a lighting thing going on here. I'll go this way or something. I don't know. Yeah. All right, well, just ignore the light shaft in your eye. I can't be bothered. We're going to wait for a couple more people to trickle in. 2 Gene streams in one day. Yeah, that's not by design. I wish I didn't have to do this, but let's just do it. Let's cook. We've only got a couple viewers, so I'm waiting. Arcadia says Gene Symphonia is a political thought/dogma of the Eastern Orthodox Church regarding theocracy. Do you think there could be an EO-theocratic state? Yeah, but it should be done state by state. So the Protestants believe that every nation has a right to its own thing, and we shouldn't have a united religion, really. And then the Catholics think everybody should just exist in one giant empire. Orthodoxy's in the middle there. So we want people to have their own nationality, and countries should govern themselves according to Orthodox morality, but then with your own cultural stuff as well. So Serbia won't be run the exact same way as Syria, hypothetically. But yeah, we're in the middle of that. So let's go. Yeah, Johnnyus Rex, this is going to be a quick one. I got to respond to this goober. All right, let's go. Well, let's see this guy embarrass me. Let's see him embarrass me. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's good. All right, let's go. And in Surah Al-Ma'idah, in verse 32, so that's chapter 5, verse 32, it states, "That is why we ordained," for those passages say.
First thing I want to point out here is that this person actually quoted the Mishnah, and he thought it was the Babylonian Talmud, which tells you he doesn't know the first thing about rabbinic literature. He doesn't even know the difference between the Mishnah and the Babylonian Talmud. So the question is,
neither of which belong to Christianity. So I don't know why you would put your own video on 2 times speed, by the way. I mean, it makes it kind of hard to even understand what you're saying. Like, I'm sure your audience can withhold more than an 8-minute attention span. But it is really kind of irrelevant whether it's the Mishnah or the Talmud. This is almost like an ad hominem. Like, oh, this guy didn't know that this source was from the Palestinian Talmud, not the Babylonian. All right, the point still stands that this is from rabbinic literature that is not accepted in Christian revelation. You're about to argue it is, but it's not accepted in Christian revelation. And you're going to make arguments that all Muslims do, that the rabbinics say this is about the Old Testament, so I have to accept it as a Christian, but I don't have to. So again, kind of a pointless critique. And one more thing before we get started. This video I did with Kyle is like almost 3 years old, isn't it? I mean, I've been in other videos. I've made hundreds of videos, well, over 100 videos since that time has occurred. And I've been on Jay Dyer's channel. I've been on Kyle's channel multiple times. Why is the only video anybody ever responds to is like a 5-minute soundbite of when I said the Talmud and the Quran have some matching theologies? Maybe address some of the more complex material that I've produced, which you can't. All right, let's continue.
Why is he speaking about rabbinic literature when he knows not even the basics?
You're about to demonstrate that you know absolutely nothing about the New Testament or rabbinic literature.
The second thing I want to point out, and this is very important to understand, is that the rabbinic literature is presented as containing oral law that was given to Moses. So this is not just made up all by rabbis.
Yes, it is. It literally is made up by rabbis. It doesn't matter what they claim. What's your name? Ibrahim. It doesn't matter what they claim. It doesn't matter if they say it's presented as God's revelation. Then why don't you hold it as actual revelation? Why isn't this on par with the Hadith if it's presented as God's revelation? But you don't, because you know it's not really God's revelation. You're just putting that standard on me because Christians and Jews happen to share the Old Testament, which even then that's a tenuous claim, because not only do we interpret the Old Testament completely differently, we actually have varying canons and varying translations. So the Hebrew translation used for rabbinism is not the same translation used in the Orthodox Church and in much of the Oriental Orthodox churches and other churches as well. So the Septuagint, the Peshitta, Masoretic, Vulgate, and then beyond that, the rabbinic version of their own text. So it doesn't really matter if some rabbis claim it's God's revelation. Well, I claim the New Testament's God's revelation. Now you have to follow it. I mean, it's really not a good argument.
Rather, this is containing oral traditions given by God to Moses himself. At least that's how the Talmud presents itself. The sages
doesn't matter how it presents itself. You said, you're going to shy away and you're going to say, well, I don't believe in this Talmud stuff or the Mishnah. Okay, but you just said that it's not a bunch of stuff made up by rabbis. But it is a bunch of stuff made up by rabbis because it's not God's revelation.
He just taught was the order of teaching the oral law. Moses learned directly from the mouth of the Almighty. Aaron entered and sat before him. And
okay, citation needed. There's no evidence that Moses actually learned this from the Almighty. You do realize no Christians hold this stuff as canon. So it doesn't matter if the rabbinics, the Jews who own the Old Testament apparently, say that this is accompanying their literature. I mean, if I want to make a parallel, I could say, what about the people who are Quranists, even though I think that position is ridiculous. A Quranist Muslim could just say, yeah, the Hadith is all just fabricated nonsense. It's not God's revelation, only the Quran is. So likewise, rabbinism is not the revelation given to Christianity. No Christians accept rabbinism's Mishnah or Talmud to be part of the revelation.
Moses taught him his lesson. Aaron moved aside and sat to the left of Moses. Aaron's sons entered, and Moses taught them their lesson, etc. So the Talmud is claiming here that the oral tradition, the oral law, is actually God-given. And the Mishnah,
according to them. So you keep using the word the Talmud's claiming. It doesn't matter what the Talmud claims. I didn't say in my video the rabbis tell people they made this stuff up. Obviously, they tell people this is God's revelation. That's what every religion does, right? Shocker. Most religions are false.
The Talmud, etc. This is the oral law. It's important to understand that these texts themselves claim to be revelation or containing revelation within them. Second thing to understand is that in the time of Jesus himself, there was a sect of Jews known as the Pharisees who believed in the written Torah as well as the oral Torah, and Jesus explicitly ordered his followers to listen to this sect according to the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said, the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat.
Number one, how do you know that that's the actual word of Matthew and it's not an abrogated corruption verse? How do you know that this stuff in the Gospel of Matthew really wrote it and Matthew really was a disciple and Jesus really said it? So you're putting, as they say, the polemical cart before the epistemic horse. Like, you're saying the New Testament teaches this, but you don't believe that this is actually from the New Testament, thereby invalidating the claim that Jesus supports the oral law, so it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and allow you to use this chapter. It's still not going to work in your favor.
And Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it. But don't do as they do, for they don't practice what they preach.
No, it's do not practice what they teach. It's not preach. Second of all, you're not understanding the second half of that sentence. Therefore, do what they teach you and follow it, but do not do as they do, for they don't practice what they teach. I wonder if he's going to understand what that part means.
Here, Jesus is explicitly confirming the oral law because he says, listen and obey everything the Pharisees do. Just don't act like them because they're hypocritical. But what they teach...
No, it's not. It's not about acting like them. It says don't do what they do. They don't practice what they teach to you. Okay? What they're teaching, and by the way, if you know what Moses' seat means, it means people who are, and here's where we're going to show that you don't understand rabbinism, neither do you understand the Old Testament, because sitting in Moses' seat does not just mean you're able to teach whatever you want with absolute zero consequence. Sitting on Moses' seat means that you have the ability to teach the law of Moses. So Jesus is saying, if they teach you the law of Moses, you can follow that because the law of Moses is binding on you vis-a-vis the Old Testament, and those are the eternal words of God, everlasting words of God. So if those are the everlasting words of God, and people sit in Moses' seat, and Moses, shocker, did not teach the oral law, then Jesus is not telling people to follow the oral law. He's saying follow people who accurately teach Moses. You would have a point if the words sit on Moses' seat was not in this verse, but it is. The verse says they sit on Moses' seat. That means that they are able to teach what Moses taught. Moses did not teach oral law. And don't bring me up another Talmud verse because that's a redaction from multiple centuries upon centuries later. There's no evidence the real Moses actually taught those oral laws. May as well be a fan fiction comic book. Now, I need to corroborate this with another chapter unless you have more to say.
Is correct. But what did they teach? They taught both the written as well as the oral law. So this idea that everything in the oral law is just made up is far-fetched.
Oh, okay. So you don't understand, again, that another verse that corroborates this is Mark chapter 7. And in fact, I'm going to just bring that up for you right now because it's astounding. I've never seen anybody actually claim that Christians need to follow the oral law of the Talmud. You know, your boy Daniel Hakikachu and others shit on the Talmud like all day long, right? They literally like defecate on the Talmud all day long. So is it or is it not part of Revelation? All right, so here's Mark chapter 7. All right, everybody see Mark chapter 7? I think it's mostly visible. All right. Starting from verse 3. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands in a special way, holding the tradition of the elders. So right there, it says tradition of the elders. This is not Moses' tradition, it's tradition of the elders. Let's go to verse 4. When they come from the marketplace, they don't eat unless they wash. And there are many other things which they've received and hold, like the washing of cups, pitchers, copper vessels, and couches. So there, it tells you right there, they received it, but they didn't get it from God or Moses. And you'll see why, again, in the next couple of verses. And by the way, you can't quote mine verses because when the New Testament was written, there was no verse 2. It was just a giant paragraph. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, meaning Jesus, why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands? So it's not the tradition of Moses. It's our tradition as the Pharisees, and the Pharisees are admitting it. They're not even arguing that this is from Moses. They're straight up saying this is our tradition as elders. Verse 6. He, meaning Christ, answered and said to them, well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And in vain they worship me, So not even true worship, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. That's Isaiah 29:13. He continues, for laying aside the commandment of God. So that sentence right there, for laying aside the commandment of God, that means the oral law is not the commandment of God. Why else would he say that? It doesn't make any grammatical sense. You hold the tradition of men. All right? And even if we use the earliest part and we don't include the last half of the sentence, for laying aside the commandment of God, you hold the tradition of men. Stop. That is enough to disprove your entire theory here, and thus you can throw this video in the trash because Christ is saying your hand washing, your oral law is not part of God's commandment. But he continues, all too well you reject the commandment of God that you may keep your traditions. So this is the third time he's now said it. And then he says, for Moses said, honor your father and mother, and he who curses father and mother, let him be put to death. But you say, so again, here we go. Moses said this, but you say that. For laying aside the commandment of God, you teach the tradition of men. And even the gospel writer himself, when Christ is not talking, says, for they hold to the tradition of their elders. And the Pharisees even say, why do you not hold to our tradition? It has nothing to do with Moses. But you say, if a man says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me is korban, meaning a gift to God, then you no longer let him do anything for his father or mother, making the word of God of no effect through your tradition. So now the word of God is not of any effect because of your tradition, which you have handed down. So Jesus right there is admitting, number one, it is their tradition. But number two, he confirms that they are handing it down. So it wasn't something they just came up with right there. He's saying, yes, you guys have had this tradition for a while, but it's garbage. Just because something appears in the New Testament doesn't mean it ought to be followed. Satan appears in the New Testament. We don't follow Satan. That's not how the New Testament works. Hear me, everyone, to understand there's nothing that enters a man from outside which can defile him, but the things which come out of him, those are the things that defile a man. And he continues again. So do you not perceive that whatever enters a man from outside cannot defile him, because it does not enter his heart but his stomach, and is eliminated, thus purifying all foods? And again, I know people say, well, what about the line, thus purifying all foods? Wasn't that added? Let's eliminate it, because it does not enter his heart but his stomach, and it is eliminated. The end. Now, this verse doesn't explicitly, and the chapter itself is not talking about, hey guys, you should go eat shrimp and pork. Jesus is saying that these dietary laws and their strictness based on the, quote, covenant of works, as Protestants would say, the Sinai contract, is not applicable to the Gentiles or the new covenant vis-a-vis Jeremiah 31. So you should avoid unclean meats because they're just unclean and they're not really healthy. Not because it has any effect on your soul. It doesn't defile your soul. It doesn't make you unclean and you can no longer pray because your soul is tainted because of some unholy pork. Again, another concept that you guys completely misunderstand. So there you go. We have Mark chapter 7. I'm going to go to Matthew 23 to give it some better treatment than what you had given it. Let's see. Whatever they tell you to observe, right there. So whatever they tell you to, that observe and do, but don't do according to their works, for they say and do not do. So the scribes and Pharisees sit in the seat of Moses. If we combine this with Mark chapter 7, which I just read to the entire class from here, Mark chapter 7 says that the commandment of God is one thing, and the tradition of the Pharisees and their oral law and their practice is another thing. Jesus says that they put aside the commandment of God to do their oral tradition. Jesus says you worship God in vain by doing your oral tradition, which is corroborated by the prophet Isaiah. So you can't even say Jesus is some renegade, he's going against the Old Testament. The Old Testament predicted this would happen. Let's continue. They bind heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one finger. All their works they do to be seen by men, which is why Jesus says to go into your room to pray. They make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. They love the best places at feasts, the best seats in the synagogues, greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi, or Teacher, Teacher. But you do not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Christ, and you all are brethren, etc., etc. This goes on and on. There's only one who is your Father, who is in heaven. One is your teacher, who is in Christ. And then down here it says, but woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You shut up the kingdom of heaven against men, for you neither go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in, because they don't teach the law of Moses. That's what Moses' seat is all about. They're not teaching that. They're teaching rabbinic nonsense. I have another example for you right here. Watch this. Acts chapter 10. Peter's vision. He became very hungry and wanted to eat, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance and saw heaven open and an object like a great sheet bound at the four corners descending to him and led down to the earth. In it were all kinds of four-footed animals of the earth, wild beasts, creeping things, and birds of the air. And a voice came to him saying, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. Peter says, Not so, Lord, for I've never eaten anything common or unclean. And then the voice responds to him again a second time, What God has cleansed, you must not call common. So the distinction between common and unclean is a rabbinic distinction. And here again, you have the Lord saying, guess what? That's garbage. That is not a belief system that belongs in the biblical religion. It is a tradition of men. All right. Peter meets Cornelius. Where is it? Another verse I want to read you guys. I think it's 11. Here. 11 verse 3. And you can look at Alfred Edersheim as well. He talks about when Jesus says to shake the dust off the earth. That is from the Old Testament, where Gentiles were considered unclean. But now, the Gentile nations were considered unclean. So you wanted to adhere to the purity of the law of Moses. But here Peter is being corrected on his rabbinism because he won't even be within the presence of a Gentile because he thinks their flesh, their human bodies are unclean and that they will taint him and defile his soul. But here he says, tells the whole story. And then he says, then God has also granted to the Gentiles repentance to life. If therefore God gave them the same gift as he gave to us when we believed on the Lord Jesus, who was I that I could withstand God? So he's basically saying, no man is unclean. That's the whole purpose of this. So Peter says no man is unclean. He willingly said, hey, I was doing rabbinism or a law that had nothing to do with the gospel, nothing to do with the law of Moses. He's corrected by Christ. Mark chapter 7, we already went into that. The Pharisees have one tradition, Jesus has another tradition. And Matthew chapter 23 is based on the event that already happened in Mark chapter 7, because that event is in both gospels. So that's kind of it. I just don't know what else to say here. I'm kind of shocked. Let's continue part of the video and then I'll be done. Let's see how much more he embarrasses me.
Furthermore, the idea that God did not reveal anything else to Moses or the other prophets apart from the Torah and the Injil, this idea that the Quran claims that only the Torah and Gospel was given, this is not supported by the Quran. He needs to actually prove this claim from the Quran itself. Where does the Quran ever make this claim? The Quran actually reveals to us that Moses was given certain revelation that's not mentioned in the Torah. And we revealed to Moses and his brother have houses for your people in Egypt, and so on. So this is revelation given to Moses before the Torah. Why? Because this scene is set while the Israelites are still.
That's a fallacious argument. Just because God spoke to Moses before Moses wrote the Torah, or in your version of the religion, received the Torah, does not mean that this is some kind of oral rabbinic tradition or an escape from the fact that you do have to contend with the Talmud, which I just proved their oral tradition is of to no avail in our covenant, of to no avail in the New Testament. God speaks to Moses long before he gives him the Torah, which for us just means he told Moses what to write and then Moses wrote it down. For you, it flew out of heaven somehow. But God speaks to Moses through the burning bush. And correct me if I'm wrong, that's long before Moses arrives back in Midian after the actual exodus from Egypt and writes the Torah. Number two, what about Abraham and Noah and all the other prophets? They also weren't given a physical Torah. So I'm not claiming that the only thing that Muslims can appeal to is a physical Torah and a physical Injil. You clearly believe in prophets that were born before Moses. But the problem is, your Quran does not say, hey, the Talmud is a righteous book, and here's the proof of it. It doesn't. It just happens to have a verse that's extremely similar to the Talmud. That's the only thing I pointed out. I did not say this is the one thing that will cripple Islam forever. And again, this is like a 2.5-year-old video. I've made much better material since then.
In Egypt, and of course, the Torah was given to the Israelites after they left Egypt. So the Quran is explicitly recording extra biblical revelation given to Moses. So the idea that
we confirm that too. That still doesn't mean that you can just appeal to the Talmud. Like, hey, God spoke to Abraham, so therefore we don't all need the Torah because Abraham didn't have the Torah. Ergo rabbinism is good. Ergo it doesn't matter if we accidentally copy some notes from rabbinic Talmud. What are you talking about?
Other oral revelation could have been given to them, or other forms of revelation apart from text that we find in the Bible. That's not far-fetched at all. In fact, the Quran explicitly confirms that revelation was given to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, the descendants, and Moses and Jesus, and the prophets. And that the Zabur was also given to David. A book was given to David.
Okay, David's after the Torah. That's really not relevant whatsoever. That's building upon the Torah. Like the Zabur is not its own book. It's part of the canon, which, by the way, the Jews had 800 years before any of the Christian councils. So you can't just say Christians invented a canon. The Jews already had that 800 years before. Let me check the comments and we'll get into it. Muslim revert. Or is that Muslim retard? Can't tell. All right, let's get into it again.
Now, he quoted this text in the Mishnah where it says that anyone who preserves a single life in Israel, it's as if they preserved an entire world. Interestingly, if you go to the Talmud, the same tradition is found. But here, it's reported that the angel said that God himself made this statement. So again, this is explicitly claiming to be revelation that's preserved within the Babylonian Talmud.
It's claimed by people who Christianity teach are wicked blasphemers against God, who were judged by God and have a false religion that will grant them zero salvation. In a book that Jesus goes out of his way to say, do not do oral tradition. So literally the polar opposite of your reading of Matthew 23 is what the New Testament teaches. Already demonstrated that with Acts chapter 10, Mark chapter 7, and I don't know, like 3 lines after Matthew 23 that you didn't bother to read, including the context of Matthew 23, where he literally says Moses' seat, which means Moses' law. Does not mean Moses plus whatever else we want to invent.
Revelation that's preserved within the Babylonian Talmud because it's talking about something that happened with the angels and God. Furthermore, it's important to understand that the Talmud, again, is not making everything up. Rather, the Talmud is working with previous sources, oral sources.
No, that is still making it up, Ibrahim. Just because somebody says this is how we deal with another source does not make it true. Otherwise, why don't you read, I don't know, are you Sunni or Shia? I'm assuming you're Sunni. Why don't you read the Shia hadith? They could say the exact same thing. Hey, man, we're not just making stuff up. Our hadith are just building upon what was already in the Quran itself. Okay? And any other reports we find are built on the Quran itself and the life of Muhammad. So why can't the Shia or the Ibadis in Oman, I don't know if they have a different canon for their corpus, or even if they have a similar hadith. Haven't really looked into that. But the Shia do have a hadith, and it doesn't match your hadith. So why can't they just say, yeah, sorry, buddy, we're building on previously established revelation. So you got to accept everything we say now. male and female demons. Yeah. This stuff has nothing to do with what we actually believe. It's someone's opinion. We both share the Old Testament. We don't share what we do with the Old Testament. We have a New Testament. They have their Talmud. It's different religions.
And possibly written sources as well. We see this, for example, in the fact that you have traditions in the Talmud which are found in extra-biblical literature outside rabbinic tradition as well. For example, in the Babylonian Talmud, you have the story of Solomon having male and female demons, and these demons help him build the temple. And that's exactly a tradition we find in the Testimony of Truth, which is an apocryphal text from 150 to 200 AD, so a pre-Talmudic text. And it says, his son Solomon is the one who built Jerusalem by the means of the demons because he received power. And in the Apocalypse of Adam, again, a Nag Hammadi text from 50 to 150 AD, it says Solomon himself sent his army of demons to seek out the virgin. So it's very obvious that the...
No, it's not obvious. All you've said is the Talmud agrees with some other random writings, therefore the Talmud's right. No, the Talmud's not right. It's just copying what other writings said. That doesn't just mean it's God's word and that Christians have to accept it. This is a complete fallacious form of argumentation. I could do the exact same thing. I could say, hey, there's a writing by some random Hebrew 900 years ago, or 900 years before Christ, I mean. I'm going to write my own text that includes parts of that, and I'm just going to say, hey, I got this right because I copied this random Hebrew guy, so I'm doing the revelation of God. I mean, all of us could just go to the Bible and the Quran right now, copy paste a few verses, write our own analysis of it. By your standard, that's the revelation of God. So I'm going to go write something tomorrow about the Quran, and I'm going to say, hey, the Quran agrees with me because I'm copy pasting the Quran. Ergo, this is the revelation of God. It's not a proper argument. It doesn't matter if other people happen to agree with part of what they're reporting. Number one, they're not even reporting from the biblical canon, which you said it's not. I mean, I don't know any Christians who read the Apocalypse of Adam. Like, what is that? You're appealing to stuff that nobody ever appeals to within Christianity, theology that we don't believe in. But just because someone somewhere on earth believed in that, and the Talmud happens to also believe in that, it's therefore the religion of God.
Talmud here is preserving an actual Jewish tradition that they had that is preserved in non-rabbinic sources, such as apocryphal texts as well. Talmud's not just making this up. This is actual Jewish tradition that they had.
Right, but that tradition that they had is made up. You're not understanding just because Muslims have this obsession with chains of narration. Just because you can prove where something came from doesn't mean it's true. Okay? So saying, hey, we can prove that this guy learned a message from this guy, who learned it from that guy, who learned it from that guy, who learned it from that guy, that doesn't mean the first thing that the person said is true. Someone could do a hadith corpus of me right now. They could do, hey, Gene said this. Well, where did you hear that from? Well, I heard it from Nick, one of his moderators, who heard it from Noob Ross, who heard it from Jay Dyer, who heard it from Sam Shamoon, who heard it from Gene's dad, who heard it from Gene's uncle, who also heard it from some rabbinic on the internet. Therefore, I'm right. So it doesn't matter if you can trace it back to something. We're saying all Jewish tradition outside of what's in the accepted Christian canon is 100% false. So if it is anything to do with a completely Gnostic, non-canonical, heretical book that is not accepted by any Christian churches, it is all wrong. It doesn't matter if somebody said it before. It doesn't matter even if they said it pre-Christ. Jesus says right there in Matthew 23 and Mark 7 that you held this tradition. So this tradition of oral law goes before the New Testament even. And Jesus still says it's still wrong. If you actually read the Old Testament, you see the Old Testament is the story of the Israelites doing stuff wrong for like 80% of history. So I'm not going to trust those same people to be perfect after the New Testament when they've been judged by the siege of Jerusalem.
That they were preserving in the Talmudic text, this idea that Solomon had demons and they helped him build the temple, etc., etc. And there are many other examples we can look at as well, where there's a tradition in the Talmud which is also found in non-rabbinic sources, which tells you the Talmud is not making all this stuff up. So what's really going on with the Talmud?
No, I never said the rabbi sat at the Talmud on 506 on a summer's eve and just invented everything like pure fantasy imagination. It's fine if they're getting stuff from other sources, but those sources are wrong. And when they are making stuff up, this is an example. They're taking something that nobody believes in and saying it's the truth. They're taking something that no Christian believes in and saying, oh, by the way, God said it. That is the definition of making stuff up.
Talmud. They are reporting actual oral tradition that they have access to, and then otherwise you can have also along with that some fabrications, whether it's certain traditions that perhaps the rabbis who are narrating the Talmud or quoted in the Talmud, they themselves made this tradition up. Possible they fabricated a tradition, or someone who is their source fabricated a tradition. That's possible, right? Or the source of their source fabricated a tradition. That's possible.
Or it's all false and they're just copying their own false sources that we don't accept.
And beyond that, you can also have just something that's not revelation that was given to a prophet that's preserved in these rabbinic texts, but you can have just history that's preserved in these rabbinic texts. For example, the Israelites, they lived through the reigns of these kings, etc., and they experience all this history, so they just remember certain historical information, and that history is passed down orally until it makes its way into apocryphal texts, biblical texts.
But the history of the Bible wasn't passed down orally. It was literally right there in the scriptures that the prophets wrote. So there's no need to say we need to appeal to a rabbinic oral law in order to remember what happens in Chronicles or Kings or any of that. And of course, with the prophecy books, they're written by the prophets. So Jesus affirms them. He says, you have to follow the law and the prophets. That's where you get your information from. You don't get your information from people outside the law and the prophets, and you don't get your information certainly from people 200 years after Christ inventing Gnostic texts.
And rabbinic texts as well. So again, this makes it quite clear, once again, that the Talmud is claiming to be revelation. The Quran never says that the Talmud is false, let me rephrase that everything in the Talmud is false, that there could be...
Nice save there. So first he said, the Quran never claims that the Talmud is false. And corrects himself and goes, actually, not all of it's false. So it's the same exact game that you guys play with the Bible. Not all of the Bible's false. There's some things we can appeal to it. But the only way that we know what to appeal to is by looking at the Quran, who I should only believe in if I have the previous scripture to know who Moses and Adam and Abraham are, so that I can say, oh yeah, this is the revelation of God. So that's a circular reasoning right there. Second of all, again, it doesn't matter what the Talmud claims it is. It's wrong. We don't accept it. It doesn't matter what it says it is. It doesn't matter if it says Moses himself wrote this while conducting the Philharmonic. It's not true. It's wrong. We don't accept this stuff.
No revelation given to the prophets of Israel apart from the Torah and Gospel. The Quran never says they were only given the Torah and Gospel. It never says that. It never says they weren't given extra tradition. And it's just common sense that if a prophet appears...
The Bible also says that God spoke to Moses before he wrote the Torah. But the only things that we're allowed to accept are what Moses then retroactively puts into the Torah. So Moses puts into the Torah that God spoke to him before he wrote the Torah. So that's fine. We can accept that. What you're saying is I should accept a revelation that nobody's heard of, is not in the biblical text, has no record of anything until after the time of Christ, and it should be accepted because it corroborates with itself 300 years later.
On the scene, he would not only speak the revelation, the text revealed to him, or the book revealed to him, but also, most likely, they would make statements apart from the book given to them, and they would do actions, and their followers would want to record or preserve orally or in a written format their actions and their sayings. For example,
Jesus says that's all garbage and it's false, and you should only listen to the law of Moses. Jesus says it's literally all false. You should only be listening to what has already been revealed and not what random elders decide is worth keeping. The New Testament is extremely anti-rabbinic. You guys don't understand the distinctions within Judaism's of the New Testament period. You think it's just Pharisees and then Christians. It's not. It's multiple groups. And the Pharisees are not just mean because they're mean. They're not mean because they do the law really well. They're mean and dumb because they invent oral law that Jesus rejects.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, we don't only have the Quran, but we have his sayings and his actions.
You didn't say alayhi salam when you said Abraham, Noah, Moses, or Jesus.
As well, preserved in the oral corpus of hadith literature. Similar with Jesus, you have his oral sayings preserved and his actions recorded as well. And so the idea that there were...
Yeah, but the New Testament doesn't say, believe it because we have a chain of narration. It says, believe it because it corroborates with previous scripture, the Old Testament. Your book does not corroborate with previous scripture, so I can't test it. And again, I already covered, it doesn't matter how many chains of narration you have, that doesn't prove something's true.
Other statements made by prophets that were just orally remembered in the tradition, in the oral tradition, is not far-fetched at all. Again,
far-fetched, but there's no citation for it, so this is just appeal to the best explanation. All right, that's it. Yeah, so as you can see, though, just so no one can claim, I did not say anything revolting about his prophet, other than saying the religion's wrong and he got everything wrong. You can't claim an ad hominem. You can't say, hey, James said to shit on people's neck. Didn't say that. Well, I did right now because I was quoting myself. Well, I'm live anyway. I guess I may as well stay here for a few moments. Hey, Jim, I'm curious as to why you didn't refer to St. Constantine the Great as saint in your book. Honestly, that one just kind of slipped by me. I wrote the book over a number of months, and I had a large amount of editations I had to do. But he is celebrated in the book, and but he's not really in it, to be honest with you. Constantine is really just in, I think, just the preface, and then maybe one mention in the book. Glad you got the book, though. Okay, revert, that's fine. Literally, my only answer to you is, that's your claim, my claim is my claim. There's literally nothing else we can say. So, since so many Muslims just say change the narrations, therefore make Islam true, yeah, it doesn't matter if something's preserved. It can be false. Like, it really doesn't matter. And you'll notice that the intelligent Muslims, some of the Ismailis and others, don't do that. They don't do, hey, we can prove that this guy said this. Okay, but what if what he said is false? I could have a chain of narration for Kamala Harris. She says false stuff all the time. That she's not a god. She's not Elohim, and she's not a Nabi. She's not a prophet. So you're going to have to show me why I should abandon the Bible and accept the religion that is the completion of the Bible, other than just saying everything's dumb and corrupt, or completely misinterpreting the New Testament like what we saw tonight. If you guys have any more questions, I'll answer them. Then I'm going to head out because none of you deserve 2 streams per day. Cool Nazarene, what's up? Yeah, guys, don't make dumb arguments though, like the mishmash stuff. Don't get carried away with that. Like, yeah, I think there's certain influences in Islam, but don't just say like, oh, Islam is just Zoroastrianism. It's just Zoroastrianism and Judaism. I've said many times, the Islamic religion is surprisingly not that Jewish. It's like people who go, oh, it copied Judaism. It's all about Judaism. That's wrong. And so that's why I get a little upset when people keep responding to this video I did with Kyle. Because again, it's 2.5 years ago. I've done a significant amount of scholarship since then and authored a book and a half. And I've never just said Islam's wrong because it copies a little bit of rabbinism. So that's a reason it could be wrong. One of many, not the reason. So why don't you refute me on me proving that there's Neoplatonism inside the Quran? So unless you're an Islamic Neoplatonist, you really shouldn't be handling the book, right? If you're an Athari, a Salafi of any type, you just can't use the Quran. It's a very Neoplatonic book. I'm sorry. It is. It does not teach an anthropomorphic God. Okay? It just does not. Like, I always used to say to myself, like, oh, if I become Muslim, I'll be like a Salafi, I'll be a Wahhabi, I'll be Hanbali, I'll be Athari of some kind. I don't need philosophy, but the Quran itself is built on this idea of this Neoplatonized version of the one. So I'm sorry, like, in some alternate universe, if I became Muslim, I would be an Islamic Neoplatonist, because that is the reason to accept that religion. The reason is not hadiths and the conquest of the Levant. The reason is the fulfillment of Hellenic philosophy. So basically, if you prove that Neoplatonism is true and you should follow it, then you should be a Muslim, essentially. That's my argument. That's my cosmological argument. If you can prove that Neoplatonism is true, then you should follow Islam, because it's the Neoplatonic religion. So enough with this, oh, it's Jewish religion, it's about the Jews. Yeah, there's a few things in there that have a strange commonality with the Talmud. And I don't think this guy actually didn't refute that at all. He literally just said, yeah, it's fine because the Talmud is God's revelation. Well, he said that the Talmud is God's revelation and Christians should accept it, but not Muslims, because we don't know what's corrupt in it. So really, it's just an excuse for me not to critique you. But I've already done that. Matthew chapter 23, Mark chapter 7, Acts chapter 10, and actually the rest of the New Testament is pretty clear that the Pharisees are the bad guys because they built on Moses' law and polluted the Old Testament religion. So this is now a message to all y'all Christians out there. If you think the message of the Pharisees is, I'm too religious, that is not the message of the Pharisees. The message of not following the Pharisees is they add garbage onto the religion. Garbage onto the religion. That's the argument. The argument is not that they're too religious. Jesus says they're not too religious. They actually fake piety. They don't actually believe in God that much. They just like to be seen as if they're believing in God. So who he's criticizing are people who don't pray that much and don't care about God that much in a real spiritual sense. They don't have a relationship with God. It's all about just being in a position of power. And they like to pray openly so everybody can see them and talk about how pious they are. You know, that is the whole point of that. And then on top of that, they add garbage onto the law of Moses. Guys, Muslim revert, I don't know what to tell you, but my comment section is not a debate chat. So you're welcome to make a video refuting this material, though I would bet my house that no one will refute this material. As in, I'm not betting that no one will make a video. I'm sure someone will make a video, maybe. But they won't actually refute this material because it's irrefutable. Oh, and by the way, your Sheikh, Bart Ehrman, agrees with me. Bart Ehrman agrees with me. All the atheist scholars in that documentary concerning St. Paul, they're from various Hebrew universities and American universities. All of them, all the textual scholars, all the textual critics coming out of U of Chicago and Moody Bible Institute and all these other places, they're all agreeing with me that the Pharisees added oral law onto the law of Moses, and Jesus is saying that is the problem. The law of Moses is not the problem. Keeping the law is not the problem. It's adding nonsense onto the law. Of course, there's many other verses where Jesus explains that the new covenant is not about keeping the law for salvation at all. It's really just we have our morality from the law in most cases. So New Testament never says you can't do bestiality, for instance. So can we do bestiality? No, because the Old Testament says we can't. So we still have to keep those moral stuff is definitely binding. But we're not in that covenant where we do circumcision to be saved, don't eat pork to be saved, follow the other laws to be saved, do the feast to be saved. None of that works toward salvation. We don't believe in meritocracy in that way. So that's what Jesus means. Like, sorry, it's not a 2-second meme answer, but this is what all the scholars are saying. Bart Ehrman gave a speech at the University of Michigan where he says quite clearly Jesus was not getting rid of the law and Jesus was not supporting the oral law. Jesus is against the Talmud, which will come in the future. He's against the predecessors of the Talmud. He's against any kind of oral law that supersedes the law of Moses, which the Talmud does. So if you invent a book where you say Moses is talking about a bunch of garbage that he never actually said, and you're just using Moses' name to further your own ideology, it's not the revelation of God. Sorry. Yeah, that's another thing. The Talmud is inwardly inconsistent because it not only mentions these strange apocryphal books like the Apocalypse of Adam. I mean, have you guys ever read the Apocalypse of Adam? Is that ever read in liturgy? Like, what is that? Even the Apocalypse of Peter, which I consider to be significantly better than the Apocalypse of Adam, is not a canonical book. Okay? Read the Didache. You are not allowed to just take random sources from ass nowhere and claim that they're the revelation of God and read the New Testament. Like, seriously. But yeah, so the Talmud is inwardly inconsistent. It's also externally inconsistent. And I don't really care about Isa because there's a lot of Muslims online that will say a lot of blasphemous things about Christ, but then they'll say, oh, I'm talking about the Christian Jesus, not Isa. So it's clear you guys use that as kind of a scapegoat to be able to insult Jesus without saying it's the real Jesus. All right, I'm done. You guys aren't getting a stream for a little bit because, well, I don't know. I'm not working tomorrow, so we'll see. Whatever. Oh, I guess I could let people on. All right, go ahead. I'm just going to do this so that nobody can claim I didn't let you on. Just go ahead. Come on if you want. But let's make this quick. I have stuff to do. I plan on playing World of Warcraft and drinking water. And we got the Sox versus the Red Sox. Now, I don't really care for the Sox. I'm not a South Side person because I don't have any bullet holes in my body. I prefer the north side of the city, and I like the Cubs. So I don't believe in no Kaffir White Sox, but they're better than the Red Sox because at least they're from Chicago. Oh, it's Nick. What's up, Nick?
How you doing, man? I just have some news to share with the stream. Finally
Okay.
written. Sia, Abu Cairo. I'm here to share chain transmission. And I heard that Jeem was a big believer in Neoplatonism. I heard this from Nubross, which he heard from someone on the internet, which that person heard from somebody on Discord. And you can't doubt this because we have chain transmission.
You guys got me. It's over. Yeah, I told Nubras heard it from the internet, and now that is all hujjah upon you guys. Welcome to the stream, man. I did not expect to do like 2 streams today. So, and I usually wouldn't. I would have waited for tomorrow, but I thought my ideas are hot. Like, I got the brain going. I got a day off. Let's just do it. So, what do you think? Decent presentation?
Yeah, it was a good one. Much needed refutation.
I mean, people keep asking me to get back into the Islam stuff. I didn't really want to, but I guess my hand was forced, so we're back at it.
Remember when you said you were going to just respond to random people?
Well, I'm done responding to atheists because I've covered that stuff so many times. But to be fair, this guy does have 7,000 subs, so he's not like a guy with like 200. I wouldn't really care.
Oh,
but
okay.
he's got a somewhat decent following. I was at that level not long ago, so I would be hypocritical to say he's too small. But if he had like 1K, I wouldn't really care, to be honest. What else we got here? Jeem, do you have a guild in World of Warcraft? No, I don't have a guild. I'm an altaholic. I have a lot of alts on WoW, so I can't even keep track of like what guilds they're in. I don't take WoW very seriously. Like, I literally just like if a new expansion comes out, I'll play it, I'll do the quests, and then I'll like run some mythics, and that's kind of it. Like, I don't care about maxing. I don't do all the content. I just kind of like to have fun with it. If I've got a spare hour or two, I'll go on there and mash around on a paladin or something. It's kind of it. Like, I like it, but I'm not like crazy about it. All right, we got some other people here. Nick, okay. What's up?
Yo, Jeem, how you been?
I've been good. Welcome back to the stream. How's it going?
All right. It's like 9 o'clock over here, so I'm about to head to sleep after this call.
Okay.
Also, I just wanted to say I appreciate the response to the chains of transmission. Oh my gosh, I can't even say the word transmission, because I swear every single time that's a main point that they always argue, since we don't have quote unquote chains of transmissions all the way from Jesus. So that's their entire argument.
Yeah, well, all you need to do is have one of them be wrong. I mean, for example, let's say I have the chain of transmission from Abu Zakaria, okay? And he tells me this whole chain of transmission. Well, what if the guy he learned it from was telling the truth or thought he was, but the guy that he learned it from, so only the third to last guy on the chain, just made it all up? There's no way for me to tell because that guy could be dead, or the person that he's claiming he learned it from could be dead. There's really no way unless I'm inside his brain and I can tell that he's actually telling the truth. So a real chain of transmission would have been the guy who speaks to Muhammad writes it down instantly, and then that writing, not instantly, let's say within an amount of time, he writes it down, and then people chain off of that writing. But to just say, I heard it from some guy who heard it from some guy who heard it from some guy, I'm sure that you might be telling the truth here, but the third guy you learned it from might be not telling the truth. And that's kind of all you need. You just need one guy to make a mistake or one guy to just be completely lying, and it doesn't matter. And then even if all that's true and the first guy really did say it, let's just say they're all correct and Muhammad really did say it, it still doesn't mean it's true. Like, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, much appreciated. Also, I just wanted to say I got a book from St. Gregory of Palamas on the triads. Just wanted to know if you're ever going to make any videos reviewing that stuff.
The reason I haven't is because I feel like a lot of the finer points of Palamism have been dealt with by a lot of other YouTubers. So if there's a high demand for it, sure. But I just wanted to cover stuff that might not be in everyone's wheelhouse. So yeah, I'll see in the future. Try to branch out to that.
All right, sounds great. Have a great night, Jim.
Thanks. You too. Get some sleep.
Yep. Well,
All right. Cool. Or no, not cool. Theodore. The mouse clicked wrong. Anyway, hey Theodore, what's up?
Yeah, Gene, I just have to know, where'd you get your signet ring? I'm just, it's very impressive, and I see you flashing it all the time. You don't
I'm
even
not-
have it on?
I don't have it on. Wait, I'll get it though. I should have it on. Give me a sec.
Wow.
Yo.
You look very intimidating.
Yeah. All right, I got it. This ring. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that
People
one.
keep saying I'm a Freemason, or like that one Muslim guy on the TikTok live who's like, yeah, Odin is a prophet of God and Thor is his messenger because he had a ring kind of like this. No, I inherited this. My grandfather got this in Egypt, so I don't know exactly where he got it, but he always had this, so that was mine. That's kind of it. I don't have anything else to add to what it is or where he got it. I know that it's blue is like lapis lazuli or something. That's kind of all I know, and it's red gold or something. Red gold is the ring itself, so inherited, but it's pretty nice. I've gone to like this deli that's run by these cops, and he immediately asked me if I had it, if it's Egyptian, and if I was Egyptian. So apparently this kind of style is familiar to someone who's Egyptian, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, I'm a cop myself, so, I mean, it stood out to me. That's why I wanted to, maybe I gotta head down to Egypt and get me one of those,
Yeah, that would be cool. So you said you're a cop yourself?
Yeah.
Nice. I don't know if have you come onto the stream before? Just a lot of people pop on, so sometimes I forget.
Yeah, one time I was asking you about Neoplatonism a while back.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you're here. And actually, there's a new Coptic channel. Not really. Okay, it's run by a Copt. He's a deacon. His name's Andrew something. He's got only like 100 subscribers, but he's been blowing up recently. So obviously, if you're into Coptic theology, I would check that out. I've seen a couple of his. I don't necessarily agree with all of it because he obviously goes against the EO position, but happy to dialogue, of course.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll take a look. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for popping on. All right, what do we got? All right, cool. What's up?
Yo, Gene, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going all right. All praise the Most High.
I'm just gonna adjust your mic because you have a little bit of like feedback noise. Okay.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. There's just a lot of like clanging and background noise.
Oh.
That's all.
I don't know. How about now?
Now it's fine.
So-
Yeah. What's your question?
I don't really have a question about a stream topic, I guess. Just wanted to hop on, say hi.
Oh, okay. Well, hello. I'm glad that you're here. You
Yeah.
fan of the channel, or do you think everything I do is garb?
No, I'm a fan.
Cool. Your name is cool.
Yeah.
Well, what did you think of today's topic? Do you think that this kind of topic that interests you, or not really?
Yeah, I think refuting the Muslims and the Abduls and just their insane claims. It's definitely necessary, like to edify the body of Christ, to have apologetics against Islam. Because I think it's First Peter, right? It says always be ready to give a response of the hope that is in you, and it's like we're gonna reach out to Muslims and we gotta be able to answer their objections.
Yeah, for sure. Like we need to be able to answer it and not just say be a Christian because Christians are cool or nice. Like we got to have a real defense of our position, but we also have to have an objection to theirs. And that's all fair. All's fair in the debate of theology. They do the same to us, so we just naturally need to defend our stuff and be able to give them something to think about. So as usual, the people who respond to me respond to one of my oldest videos, and it's probably one of the simplest topics I've ever covered. So I've yet to see someone respond to the other stuff that we've mentioned, and that's why, again, I respect the Islamic Neoplatonists, because even though I disagree with the worldview, they seem to match their scholars, like their ancient scholars, and the Quran itself. I haven't seen much backlash against that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, if that's it, thank you for coming in.
All right, then have a good one.
You too. Uh-oh. We got our resident crook. What's up?
Hey, man. Thank you for the 2 streams. I know we don't deserve it, but you're breaking your back for us.
No,
Thank you
no,
so much.
I'm just joking around.
I know, I'm kidding.
You guys deserve like 10 streams a day. I don't have time for 10 streams a day.
Okay, no, man, that's gonna like actually break you. So yeah, one thing I just wanted to talk with you about, because this might be interesting for the rest of the chat, and I think this is a point not even some other Muslims themselves know, but when we look into Islam having some points that overlap with Neoplatonism, that shouldn't really be an accident, because I remember from your video talking about how the Middle East was at one point much closer to Europe, and so was Northern Africa. It seems that many early Muslims felt that they were being this fulfillment, not just of the Abrahamic religion, but the whole Mediterranean Western civilization as well. I mean, early on, Muhammad and his companions, I think they were praying towards Jerusalem before they were instructed to pray towards the Kaaba in Mecca, similar to like how it was perceived that Jews would always pray towards Jerusalem. And at some point, I remember from one of your streams or videos, they were talking about how they thought the Byzantines were like, ruining the Greek legacy, and they were going to fulfill it.
Exactly. That's a really important one. So a lot of you guys don't know. So the Byzantines, even though they're made up of ethnic Greeks, also Anatolians, Armenians, and others, that somehow they just sat around doing Hellenism, but it's actually the opposite. And actually, David Erhan has a great video saying that Orthodoxy is not the Hellenic one in Christianity, it's really Catholicism. But that aside, the Byzantines focus on actual Orthodoxy, whether you use uppercase or lowercase O for that, it's doubly applicable. And the Muslims, many of their scholars, or their citations, say that the Byzantines abandoned the majesty of Greek mathematics and philosophy. And so when the Muslims came, that's why I don't like this whole, Islam is just like this Salafi religion, and all the Muslims were just these like insane people who hated philosophy and they wanted to blow everything up. That's a modern, semi-modern, like what's it called, restorationist version of Islam. Like, okay, Islam still did some violence in the past, not denying that, but they did, you're right, see themselves as the completion of the old world. And that's why, like, in North Africa, well into the Middle Ages, Muslims and Catholics are using the exact same suppositions. And they even get some of their philosophy in the Islamic Golden Age from the Syriac Church, who preserved Aristotle. And that's where they learned a lot of that from. So it's really not this alien vacuum religion. And St. John Damascus says is just a heresy of Christianity. That's how similar he thought it was.
Exactly. And this is props up when I talk to Muslims, for example, if they want to say, Christianity seems to be very Romanized or Hellenized. It's like there's things in the Quran, in your religion, that overlap very nicely with, quote unquote, Western civilization values and all that. And I'm saying this like almost to defend you guys, because your own prophet like saw himself as fulfilling that. So that's not like
the insult argument. Story.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off. There's an interesting story. Right. I don't know how authentic this is, but there's a character named Zayd, and Zayd laments how he doesn't agree with the Jews, he doesn't agree with the Christians, he hates paganism, he likes the God of the Jews, but he just will not join Judaism or Christianity. And even though this author is kind of a crackpot, I'm just going to mention it anyway. Reza Aslan says that Muhammad probably was inspired by what Zayd had said, in that we should worship Abraham's God, but the Christians and Jews are both wrong. So it's kind of like we have all these religions around us. We're so divided. We don't like either of them, but we know intuitively that the God of Abraham is right. There's got to be another option here. So, I'm not going to get into conspiracies. I'm not going to say Muhammad invented all that just because he spoke to Zayd, and I don't even know how authentic that story is, but it does kind of lead into this idea that this is the culmination of all of these different beliefs. And it's not as simple as saying, Allah's a moon god and Islam is Judaism. Like, I don't think it's Judaism or moon god. It's something much more complicated than that.
Right, exactly. And it makes sense when you realize, of course, there was multiple versions of Christianity that were like competing with each other at this time. Obviously, we had rejected most of them as heresies, and we have what we have today. But it's not impossible that what Muhammad had heard, what we would consider a heretical sect of Christianity, to him was the orthodox or like true sect, and he saw himself as fulfilling it. So that would be my conspiracy, quote unquote. But again, it just goes back to like how when some Muslims make argument, like you're just scratching your face and you almost just want to debate for them. It's like, guys, why are you saying this? Your own prophet, like, again, thought he was going to like fulfill the Mediterranean civilization. It's like, so why
That's
are
why
you
I
like?
say like it's weird how in the modern day Islam gets associated with like just Pakistan and India, and obviously like Muslims do just not like the West very much. But again, that's a purely religious thing. But in the old world, they didn't see themselves as like, hey, we're these aliens from another planet. Like, oh, we're from the same general area as a lot of the Christians are Middle Eastern too, but we just have the purer religion. And then over time, Christianity became more emphasized as a Western religion, but at the start, they're both really close to each other.
Right. Yeah. And then you have like some people who just get into weird ass conspiracy theories. Like you said, oh, they think Allah is a moon god. But then you also have Muslims who think Judaism, Christianity are these like Greek pagan religions. But it's like, it's not, guys. Just no Facebookisms, please, when it comes to debate. No Facebookisms.
Yeah. Let's deal with some primary sources. Let's do what the saints say. All right. Well,
thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming on again, Two Crooks. And then the last person, we're going to have Dom Manuel. I'm just adjusting your audio. Give me a second. What's up, Dom?
Hey, Jim. I was looking at a lot of your videos on Neoplatonism and the Platonic philosophy.
Sure.
Do you have any books or sources on it?
Well, I don't mean to I don't mean to self-promote, but for me, I just kind of talk in my videos. So the one place where I have all the sources of what I list, like what various saints say, what Islamic and rabbinic theologians say, as well as what Plato and Plotinus actually say, those will all be in my book. So I suppose I should probably say more citations on video. I just didn't think it was the proper platform for it, but I have like 370 or 380 citations in the book. Most of them are quoting philosophers or theologians. So all that stuff is there. My videos are really just kind of a casual way of me discussing this as if we're at a coffee bar. So I don't get as formal in the videos, sad to say.
Oh, well, I'm halfway through your book anyways, so I can just look at the sources.
Oh, yeah, just look at the citations. Some of them are really long, but if you just look up the authors that I put there, you'll see the citations for that. So the big one is going to be Chapter 8. It's called Hellenic Ontology and Biblical Reality. And that's just an introduction to all the philosophers, what they get right, what they get wrong. Where did Socrates say X, Y, and Z? Where did Plotinus say X, Y, and Z? And where does the Quran say this stuff? That's all in that chapter. And then the rest of the book is kind of referencing those because they've already been mentioned. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's my only question. Love your vids, though.
Okay, thanks so much. And I'm glad I was able to help. If you have any other questions, and if you have any other questions any other time, just DM me or leave a comment here.
All right.
Awesome. All right, thank you. All right, guys, that's it. I didn't want to really do 2 streams, but this was a necessity because I don't like to let this stuff float into the ether and then be like, oh, are you going to respond? This guy said something. So, and also, this is a topic I really like responding to. But if people do a video like, hey, Gene mispronounced something in the Urdu language, I don't really care. All right. I'll see you guys later. And I really don't know what you guys are talking about.